This first one here, before we move on, it has to do with happiness. Happiness is very simple. Happiness is ephemeral. It only lasts a short period in the brain. It's not made to last. Anger, hatred is made to last. Fear is made to last. Anxiety is made to last because of the fact that those are important, are threats to your survival. Happiness has to drive us to have sex again so the species propagates, drives us to eat again, drives us to do many things that we find pleasure in because those dopamine circuits in the nucleus accumbens start to dissipate. So the only way we can get that happiness back is by doing the act again. Brett Favre, I always use him as an example. He had this wonderful feeling after a football game, during the game, after the game, before the game. But he lost that when he retired. So he went back to try and play again. And he tries to find that in different. In fact, now the last thing I heard, he's trying to get involved in the Packer organization, trying to get those happiness circuits that he had then activated again. These people that worked on this garden, these gardeners all had these happiness circuits developed when they were in teaching, administration, different walks of life where they had power, control, success, and independence. But when they retired, they lost some of that and their ability to get that on a daily, weekly basis. So they developed their own projects like the garden, which would have a return to the community, and they could bond together and they could get that feeling again that they're doing something that's worthwhile and something that will make other people feel better, which a lot of these people did in their professions on a daily basis. So happiness will drive us. It'll motivate us. The human self, we talked about that. The self is part of our social reality. Whatever our self is, our morals, our beliefs, our values, that's our social reality. If you're from the ghetto, you have different morals, different values, different memories, and that becomes your social reality. All of our social realities aren't the same. These people that, depending what your custom, culture, and nurturing is, will make a difference with your social reality. And the human self, which is a composite of all these different things I've talked about, will make a difference how you react or what your social reality is. Can you change yourself? Yes, not easy to change the brain, but you can. You could tweak. You could learn to make new concepts, tweak those concepts. You can learn to control, which later on we'll get to, that interoceptive system. Yes, you can control the interoceptive system. Not the first feeling you get, but you can't let it dictate your life. Later, as we learn about the interoceptive system, you'll understand what I'm talking about. This is an interesting one. Our brain fools us into thinking our perceptions are reality. What this means basically is we see the world through our custom, culture, and nurturing, through our self, how it was developed. And our brain makes its best guess through the insula, a perception. It makes a perception, and it has limited choices. All the information that it gets, the insula will come up. Does this make me sad? Does this make me angry? Does this make me fearful? Does this make me disgusted? Does it make me joyful? Does it surprise me? Does it cause acceptance, anticipation, which is pleasure? But it'll give me some sort of subjective evaluation from all the information that's in my brain from the past, the present, the interoceptive system, the affect system, and all it does is gives me the best guess of what's going on in the world the way I see it. But the person next to me is doing the same thing with different information in their brain, making a different perception. There are general things we agree on. The sky is blue. The grass is green. But a lot of the more delicate things, we look at the world differently. These people are the gardeners. look at the world, that they can make a difference for people by making this beautiful garden so that when people come there, they can actually free their human self from the task of always being worried about the external world. They give you a green space where when you come there, it's a wonderful feeling because of the fact the human self now is freed from always being on guard of the external world. It's a peaceful environment. Many of our most brilliant minds did that. They would go out, not make a garden, but they would walk in gardens, take walks in nature by themselves when they had to really think about things. People like John Kennedy, people like Winston Churchill, on and on of people would go and they'd get away so that they were no longer worried about the external environment. They were now using their interoceptive system, their affect system, and they were making concepts that they would not be able to make without being in that peaceful surrounding, because now the human self was freed of worried about that barrage of stimuli from the external environment. And they could do more introspective, more reflective thinking, and they could do more abstract and come up with concepts they would never have come up with if they would be busy in a busy world talking to people. Easiest way to do that, you could activate which is part of the human self. The default network becomes active when the external network becomes less active. It happens, you're not daydreaming. You're actually being able to think about things that you wouldn't normally be able to think about, again, if you were worried. And that network is well developed, and it can be seen on MRIs, it can be seen on functional MRIs, it can be seen on different tests for that people that really are deep thinkers, that have brilliant concepts. You could see that whole network. People that, again, that probably are not as educated. I don't like to use that, but is not as educated. Those people do not have a well-developed default mode network as people that go into, when they have to get alone, when people want to write a great novel, what do? They find a place where they're alone. They find a place where they can do this deep thinking and activate this system. And this system becomes activated when you take away as much external environment as possible. And this system can grow. It can continue to grow, the default mode network, for when as you age, as you get older. It doesn't stop growing, only if you stop learning. And stop thinking. That's what allows us in religion and meditation and prayer, help us activate the default mode networks and activate the human self so it's not worried about things in the external environment. That default mode network needs tranquil places. And what is a garden? It's a beautiful, tranquil place to go there and sit and just do one thing. Think. But it doesn't think, here's the key, it doesn't think about external things. It uses the internal concepts that it's already there and allows us to cross-reference them, allows us to use internal mental concepts and come up with new ideas from those concepts. All creativity is, that's again, people argue about the difference between originality and creativity. Creativity is mixing and matching things that you have already in your brain and cross-referencing them and coming up with a new idea and a new way to present that. An artist, someone that's maybe painting in nature, that has a background for painting and has seen so many different scenes in nature's been so many different places. I can't do that because I don't have that information in my brain to cross-reference. Actually, there's 6 layers of our brain in our gray matter, and 5 of those layers are doing all that cross-referencing, and it comes to the 4th level of those layers of in our gray matter, and that comes forward. And it comes forward to the conscious mind after we mix and match all that information, and that is creativity. Something new comes out of it. But if I don't have information in there, People who are great mathematicians, people that write great novels, they have so much information in there. I can do that and come up with new concepts and new ideas with the human brain, but I can't do it in all areas because I don't have the information to mix and match at that level and come up with new creative ideas for the concepts that are in my brain. The more concepts, the more variabilities, the more probabilities. Concepts are extremely important that you keep building those all your life. The trouble is, you could build bad ones or good ones. That interoceptive system, which measures your body, how you feel, basically your body budget system, if that system is not feeling good, and the effect system right above it says that it's an unpleasant feeling, and I come across something and I'm making a concept, but my body is feeling unpleasant, and I see it, there's a stimuli out there, and I'm making a new concept. There's a high probability that that's going to be not a healthy concept. It's going to be a concept when I bring it back that it's going to make me feel uncomfortable, anxiety, depression, whatever. So you want to make sure that the concepts that you build are concepts that are healthy. Because once they're in there, you can tweak them, but they're in there. You can build new ones to counteract them, but they're hard to get rid of. So how you're feeling, who you're with, where you are all important to making these concepts. Children that come from abused homes, come from abused, from poverty, they make concepts based on survival. But these concepts now are put in there, so when they make a prediction, their predictions are different from the concepts they have. Children that come from an educated home that maybe that they've heard 30 million words by the time they're 3 years old, their concepts are going to be different. They're going to be more elaborate. All concepts are fed by words. They're basically all fed. That's the feed, the fuel for concepts, are words. The more sophisticated your language, the more sophisticated your vocabulary, the more sophisticated your concepts, the more creative you can be. And under that concept, whatever it would be, you could have maybe the color red. You could have 2,000 different little instances put under that concept of red. Somebody that doesn't have it educated, has a limited vocabulary, the more concepts are dependent on vocabulary. So every time I learn a new word related to the brain, it allows me to have more concepts because I have more categories, because I have more headings. You could use a word, and I don't want to swear, but just say that the word shit. There are people that would use more words, there's a couple of key words on there that people like to use. But let's say with shit, you could say, he's a dumb shit. No shit. What the shit? Holy shit. I don't give a shit. Oh, I got to take a shit. I'm having a shitty day. But you don't need many words if you're using one word for different inflections. That doesn't help the brain. That's not creative. If you have a concept, if you have a word for each one of those different things that you were talking about, if I was talking about, say, I felt ill will towards someone, I might say that I have enmity towards them. I have odious feelings. They're a malefactor to me, or whatever. I would come up with a bunch of different ways to say that I don't like them, or they don't like me. But the more words I have, the more headings I have, the more instances I have, the more concepts I have, and the more I can be creative and understand the world around me. Words are valuable, very valuable, when it comes to building concepts. And that's what allows us to share our concepts, too, with other people. Words. the people that worked on this, the gardeners, probably have the same morals, values, beliefs in general compared to maybe people that were raised in the inner core of Milwaukee. Not only that, their vocabularies, these people that are working together, probably is fairly extensive, meaning that they have a different way of looking at the world, and the more finite you can make an instance in one of those concepts, the more you can define in those concepts, the more control you have over your emotions, the more control you have over your world, because you see the world, you don't get upset on every little thing. But if if you have one concept of sad, and every other thing that you feel or see is making you sad or depressed, and you don't have it only defined like these other people do, if you only got a couple instances on there, generally everything's making you sad. But if you define each one, it takes a lot more to make you sad, because these 2,000 instances don't. Oh, there's just this one little thing does. Once you learn to define those instances, and that comes with education, that comes with having the words to do that, and the background, the education to do that. And you're more likely to be controlling your own destiny. Delayed gratification is a wonderful thing. It comes with the ability, when somebody's going to write a novel, it's going to take a long time to get that reward for that. There are so many things that were delayed, and people used to have greater delayed gratification. If you think about when they used to build these in Egypt, those great big buildings and so on like that, and it took years and years and hundreds of years, whatever, to build some of these things. That was delayed gratification. What is changing that now and changing the brain? Instant gratification. How do we get instant gratification in the brain now compared to that delayed gratification from my generation, your generation? The new generation has instant gratification because the cell phone, the computer, all that stuff gives you instant gratification. If you it wasn't good enough anymore for us to have emails. It wasn't good enough for us to have texting. It wasn't good enough to have whatever. Now it's Instagram. It goes faster and faster. And it's also hurting the educational system to delayed gratification, because the kids come into the classroom and they can get reward if they want to find the answer to something. They can just look on Google and it's right there. They don't have to research anything. They don't have to do anything. When we're telling them that their education is important for the future, they don't have delayed gratification to see if I do this and do that and do that, 10, 15 years down the road, it'll pay off for me. Their brains are now telling them everything I've been raised with has given me instant gratification, so it's tougher for me to look down the road. They don't have that anymore. It's harder on the brain. They want instant results. They want short bursts of information. Everything they do, they don't even write when they text. The new generation doesn't do it in a complete sentence because it takes too long. They have all their little symbols that'll get it done faster. So delayed gratification was something that was probably years ago. Now even farmers, think about that. Years ago, farmers used to have to do the toiling and all the work and all the stuff. Now with the modern things, with milking cows, with the new machinery, all they do is push buttons and do things, and everything happens fast for them. Delayed gratification is getting to be harder and harder to find in the brain. And it's because of modern technology. It's changed the brain. And can you teach that? Yes. But it's getting less and less people to teach it, because the new generation is now handing that technology to their children. what it's done is the brain is getting smaller and smaller. It is getting smaller because it doesn't have to predict anymore. It has to do less predicting, hold less information to make that prediction. Where I'm still a person that processes in my brain. These people are accessors, the new generation, which means that all they got to know is just, for instance, Google. And they don't have to predict, they don't have to simulate, they just go to Google, shoot it in there, or if they're, it used to be that in our hippocampus, the right side of it was where we kept a map of the world, so we know where we're going. We don't get lost. If we wanted to go to Southridge or go someplace, we'd have that map. Nowadays, what do the kids do when they're driving in a car? They go to Google. They say, "I want to go to this. I want to get there. Give me to Madison, Wisconsin. I want to go to Camp Randall." The phone will take them there. They no longer have to do that. Everything is done for them. So the predicting system that had to simulate the road and then make a prediction with that simulation in the brain to where I'm going, and then compare it. Oh, yeah, it did work out or it didn't work out. There's less prediction error in the brains now. Prediction error means you're learning. There's a prediction by the brain, maybe a simulation, and then there's an error. The brain doesn't mind that because then it corrects that, and that's called learning. Now there's less prediction error because Google is taking me right there. I'm not doing the predicting. The machine is, and it's so accurate that it's taken away that prediction error in the brain. Less and less has to be done by my brain. More and more is being done by technology. So what I used to have to predict before, I don't have to predict. What they're not doing is, years ago people would be able to look into the future, and they'd look 10 or 15 years down the road what their education would mean, and the value of it. Nowadays, kids, they can't get out they don't even know what they're doing a week from now. Oh, they'll say they are, but basically their prediction system is almost getting to be non-existent. And they don't have as many prediction errors. Why? Because the machines are doing it for them. But you take that machine away from them and ask them to do something, that technology away from them, and now their brain is all of a sudden stumbling around because when a person like me, my brain kept a lot of the information in there for predictions. It kept a lot of the information. So anytime it wants to predict something, if I want to go to, again, let's say I want to go to Miller Park from here. My brain, I get in my car, my brain, without using any technology, will simulate the path to Miller Park. Now, I could be going that path that my brain has predicted, and I'll follow it, but all of a sudden there's construction in the way. That's a prediction error. Now I have to go around it. I have to figure out a way to solve getting there because there was a prediction error, which is learning. I have to find a new path. With Google, all I'd have to do is tell it, it knows construction's there already. It'll make the prediction error for me and take me on a route directly there without me making any prediction or prediction error. I don't have to keep the information. I don't have to simulate it. I just have to follow it. And the more intimate our relationship with the machine becomes, the more intimate our relationship with it. In other words, you take that machine away, that phone away from kids today, and there's not just a psychological, there's a physiological withdrawal, because that's dependent on the way they function brain-wise. Their brain is getting, without their permission, wired to that and communicating with that phone, that computer. You take that away, and their brain's searching. It's anxiety. It's withdrawal. The haves and the have-nots. Because of the fact that if you come from a family, a middle class, upper middle class family, or a poverty family. The amount of things technology-wise that are in that home, from the TVs to so on and so on, and we're not just talking about playing video games. We're talking about technology and even the vocabulary. Again, how important vocabulary is to the brain. Again, a child that's comes from an educated home might hear 30,000 words, 30 billion words, I'm sorry, by the time they're 3. They might hear, if they come from a lower middle class, they might hear 20 million. They come from poverty, they only hear 10 million. Well, think about that labeling for concepts. It all comes back in a circle. Just because of the fact that there's all those words, all that technology, and as they go up the ladder, not just for entertainment. Now, poverty people have those phones and so on for entertainment, but that's not just for learning. And you got people teaching you how to use this technology. The gap is getting greater from the haves and the have-nots. And it's happening earlier and earlier in life, which now makes it more difficult to make up the difference. And that poverty breach and that upper middle class, whatever you want, is getting wider and wider. There's not much in between, the haves and the have-nots. And that's also happening with the brain. The garden, again, gives us something that our brain needs, and these intelligent people, these people that, you'll see people that are very intelligent, that have a tremendous cognitive reserve, going to places like this because they need time to get away from that external barrage of stimuli that hits them all day long, all the time. They need a chance to get away and reflect and have introspection. Again, to get by themselves, to free the human self so they can look in, because all day long, when they're out there in the world with their jobs and so on, they're looking out. The brain was not made to look in. You have to take time to do that. Religion used to do that. There's less and less people using religion for that reason, to free the human self through meditation and prayer. So the garden's a spot where people can go and free that the human self, so it can start looking in, and the brain isn't concerned, and this is what throws people off. The brain isn't as concerned, it's more concerned how our audience sees us than how we actually are, unless you take time in the garden to look at yourself and have self-awareness. Unless you do that and have self-compassion. But the brain is more concerned in this world how our audience perceives us than how we actually are. We're worried about how people see us. And that's what its concern is. If we could fool people to thinking that we're this or that, we don't care, as long as they think we're great. Even though maybe we're doing something that's not so great when people aren't looking. But the brain isn't concerned about that. The brain's more concerned about how our audience perceives us. And people get fooled by that than how we actually are. And our perceptions. The brain is kind of sometimes a little bit mean to us, our own brain, because it tells us that our perceptions are reality. And they're not. They're our perceptions. But if you believe that your perceptions are realities and the person next to you aren't, whoa,